Dealing with supernatural creatures is tiring, since the word got out that I was a human that knew about creatures and could offer services for them. I've become fairly busy. The friendlier creatures would drop into my office asking for simple requests, most of which was buying certain types of human food they otherwise couldn't get a hold of. I would need to hire on a second person for my small pie company if this kept up. I was doing those small jobs on top of my regular work, and on the occasion taking cases with Nick. Those cases often threatened my life, but the payment was well worth it. A break came when Nick called offering a job he hoped to have closed quickly. I finished up handing off some mangoes to a very small pale creature waiting in my office that requested them. The creatures didn't have access to money, so I asked for other things as payment. Matthew, an ex-hunter now working for the corporation, told me that parts of creatures held power and I should get a hold of what I could through my new services. The pale creature gave me 3 strands of hair in exchange for the fruits. I safely tucked them away in an envelope until I could give them to Matthew to use for tools. By then, Nick arrived at my office to pick me up. The new few hours we drove until we were in the middle of nowhere. I got him caught up on what I was doing lately. He hadn't told me about the case yet, if he wasn't offering up details or handing me my gun for the job when he first saw me. It meant the case should hopefully be easy. A garage in the middle of a dirt road was the only building around. He pulled into park in front of the large doors. Without a word, he got out to go over and swiped a card by the door to open them. That was strange. This place looked as if it was stuck in the 60s. What was a swipe card reader doing on an old building like this? He asked me to pull the car inside while he walked along to guide it. I awkwardly crawled over to the driver's side to do so. Inside appeared to be a normal garage, car parts and tools scattered on dusty shelves. On the far side were another set of large doors. Nick walked over as I waited. He punched in a number on a keypad next to the other set of doors, then got inside the car again. "What is this all about?" I asked, trying to figure out why we were there. "We need to go somewhere, but it is not the right season for it. I cannot create a spell for such a thing, so places like this have been installed," he explained, as if this was normal after everything I'd seen so far. Implied time travel was far too much. I sat with the car idling until he looked over. Unable to think of any words, I simply looked from him to the now open door on the other side of the building with a questioning expression on my face. Now that the door was open, golden orange light poured in. Off in the distance I could see tall cornfields. It was summer, nowhere near the time corn should be that height. One side of the building was autumn, and the other was summer. "We're time traveling?" I asked, finally unable to accept it. "Something like that. We were wasting gas, so still in the driver's seat." I started forward into whenever Nick brought us. Aside from it being a different season, everything appeared normal. It wasn't even chilly as fall should be, at least not until it got darker. Nick directed us down a farm road through the cornfields. We stopped at an abandoned-looking house as he got out. Another car was parked, looking newer than the house. I followed behind him, looking around. "This reminds me of the house and signs," I said. I'd recently put on some older movies while I did some paperwork, and that was one of them. I liked it when I was younger, but now as an adult thought it was a little bit lame. Nick did not watch a lot of movies, so I yet again needed to explain the reference. When I told him it was an alien movie, he paused, staring at me as if I was psychic. "What's that look for?" I sounded worried. "We are going to meet some. I suppose they're not agents, but volunteers of our sister corporation. It deals with alien sightings, along with other secret government issues. The corporation isn't directly connected with any governments. A select few people are aware of it, but overall, we keep humans in the dark about supernatural creatures. The sister corporation is different. Most of our agents aren't certain of what they deal with or their involvement. We are to determine if what is happening here is supernatural or something else. If it's something else, we'll leave it up to them." I felt as if my world was crashing down from his word. This entire time I've been calling Nikki a government agent, and yet there was another company that dealt with even more secretive things. With his suit and neutral expression, he looked the part. Now what should I call him? Just an agent? Somehow that worry completely overshadowed the fact he was talking about aliens being real. Again, a bit of confusion came over his face over my sudden shift in mood. "I can't believe you're not a government agent," I said while shaking my head. "In a way I am. The corporation receives grants and payments from the government as needed, instead of that money going towards local road maintenance. It's for agents to remove supernatural pests from the parks or sewers. The government is just not aware of it. After all, agents risk their lives every case. Most would not do so without the large payments." Now that explained why the 5 massive potholes along the road in front of my apartment hasn't been filled in yet. I couldn't even be upset over it. I've taken some of those large payments. Cases like killing a witch, abducting people paid a little over 10 grand. I've heard agents fighting against large creatures could get upwards of $500,000 if they're able to take it down. Being human, those jobs were not in my pay range. And most of the time, not all the agents returned. I was happy doing little cases like this. As we carried on into the cornfield, Nick explained what was going on. In the past month, strange things have been happening in the area. Cattle being mutilated, odd lights in the sky, and now a crop circle. Nick wanted to look over the circle to see if he could sense any traces of magic left behind. Walking between the stalks was awful. It was humid and hot as hell. The air thick with dust, making it hard to breathe and keep up with Nick. He wasn't bothered by the heat in the slightest. Just before we arrived through the opening, he paused to look over his shoulder. The people in the sister corporation are a bit strange, he said in a bit of a warning tone. After everything I've already seen, how strange could they be? For God's sake, we time traveled to a different season to get here. I think I could handle what else the world could throw at me. We walked out into a circle clearing, into one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Two people were half walking, half dancing in the clearing. A woman with sandy hair and large glasses was reciting some sort of chant, praying to the moon to bless them with a visit from the space children. A man was doing the same dance with her, stone-faced, repeating only part of their chant. He was dressed in a t-shirt with a classic alien giving the peace sign on it. His face gentle, but with eyes a bit too large. Both Nick and I stood frozen at the sight of them. When they noticed people watching, the girl let out a startled scream, her partner not reacting much. "What the hell are you?" she accused. Face red and pointed a finger in our direction. "This place is closed off. We're part of a company investigating sightings." You're going to mess up all of our reading." She raced over to some bulky equipment in the middle of the clearing, groaning at what was being displayed. She shook her head at being interrupted by two newcomers. We tried to walk into the clearing to explain ourselves, but she stopped us, going on about how our footprints would ruin the traces left behind. The pair was wearing some plastic booties over their shoes, stomping over his shoes, making a comical sound from the plastic. She snatched Nick's badge he pulled out from his hand. "You don't look like an agent," she said with her eyes narrowed. Nick's hair was a bit of an unnatural color. His agent expression and stance did make up for it though. Her partner came over to look over the badge and calm her down. "This is the pair we were told was coming. Don't worry about it. The badge is official." She scoffed to go back to her work, but only after she rudely shoved Nick's badge back into his hands. Her calmer partner stayed to speak with us. "Chas, this is Rebecca. She's normally better, but I think you startled her when you showed up in the middle of our moon dance," he said. His voice was even and well-paced. Honestly, he appeared to be a really chill guy. Was the dance a way to contact aliens or something? I offered, still a little stunned over our short interaction. "We're not crazy. Or do you think all of the ones with the corporation like that stupid alien meme guy? It's a good luck dance," she shouted from her machines. "Sister corporation," Nick corrected. That was not helping us get along, apparently. The company dealing with aliens was stared up after the one that dealt with the supernatural. Nick wasn't even aware he made a mistake in correcting her. Rebecca scoffed at his comment while trying her best to look busy. "I bet you two are going to say Bigfoot did this, or claim someone with mind powers flattened this crop. You people from the side division are all the same. Ghosts this, werewolves that. None of you do real science." Chaz let out a sigh from her rant. That wasn't the first time he heard such a thing, and doubted it would be the last. Nick was being very patient and learned his lesson on trying to correct her about what we did. "I've been face to face with creatures before, and nearly died a few times because of it." Rebecca was acting as if it wasn't all real when a feeling started to sink into my stomach. If her company dealt with aliens, had she ever seen a supernatural creature before? Was she aware that even though Nick looked human, he wasn't? Had she ever even seen an alien before? I looked at Nick's waist where the orchestra was clear as day. It was a magic sword, but it couldn't be seen by humans. I could only see it because I've used it before, and with all the time spent around the supernatural, my sight for them was better than most. This girl who was spending her life looking beyond the stars wasn't even aware of what was right in front of her. "Show her your magic marker," I whispered sarcastically over to Nick. He gave me a small nudge to shut me up. Chaz took over as he was willing to explain to us what they found out. He showed us a bunch of readings they've taken from the crop circle, and it all sounded like gibberish to me. They also taken overhead photos of the circle so we could see what strange kind of pattern it was. Overall, it wasn't too complex, just a few interconnecting lines of circles. Nick didn't appear interested in any of it. When I was younger, I had my alien phase like most people my age. I watched a bunch of documentaries only to fall out of interest after I saw how easily circles could be faked with two guys and some wooden boards. In fact, I haven't even heard about crop circles recently. Must have been a passing fad. We have gotten permission to stay in the old farmhouse and monitor our equipment to watch for the strange lights for a while, Chaz told us after he'd gone over everything. We'll stay a few nights looking through the woods as well," Nick said. I suppressed a groan. So far none of this really looked like aliens or a supernatural threat. But nothing good ever came from looking through a forest at night though. The last few times I'd been in one I nearly ended up dying. I really hated the woods. We left the pair to their work because we couldn't help much with what they were doing. As I followed Nick back out, I kept wiping the sweat from my forehead. Autumn should be cooler than this. He'd taken a small piece of a flattened corn stalk to examine it once we were away from prying eyes. I could tell gears were working away in his head. "So, what are you thinking? Magic, aliens, or people?" I asked after he didn't speak for a while. He kept feeling the piece of the stalk with his thumb deep in thought, tucking it away between the pages of a small notebook he always carried. He turned to face the cornfield. "I am not aware of any creatures that would do such a thing. If it was just the cattle, that would make more sense. Many creatures would harm cattle. But the lights in the crop circle are not connected to supernatural creatures. So, aliens," I offered, uncertain. I do not dismiss their existence outright. But I have never encountered any concrete signs of them. Nor has anyone else in the corporation as far as I am aware. All of these events are possible for a human to accomplish. I would like to remain for a short while until we come to a decision. Something was bothering my partner. It was as if he had the answer in the back of his mind but just couldn't reach it, since we were going to stay for the night. Or maybe more. Nick pulled some sleeping bags and supplies from the car trunk. He carried it until the farmhouse and we found the setup Rebecca and Chaz had going in the main room. A table of monitors showed a live feed of cameras placed around the woods. Piles of papers were scattered across the table with empty cans of energy drinks. They may be weird, but they were a hard-working pair. After getting our stuff set up, Nick and I went to explore the woods, much to my displeasure. He handed me my gun when we took the other supplies from the car. I really didn't want to have to use it. I followed closely behind him as the sun started to set. As it got darker, I found it hard to see on the moonless light. Nick handed over a flashlight and that helped. It was still freaky being out in the woods looking for aliens. Or who knows what else. I didn't know how long we would look for. After an hour, we stumbled on an old shack in the middle of the woods. A stone foundation was left behind near the shack. Somehow the house rotted away, and yet this little wooden shack stayed. My hand hovering over my holster, I kept the flashlight on Nick as he walked over to open the door. I was glad he went in first. That little place looked as if it was crawling with spiders. When it was clear, he let me come over to look inside the small space as well. On the dirt floor was piles of newspaper. Empty white glue bottles were littered around wherever they would fit. I'd seen scraps of newspaper inside the clearing but didn't think much of it. Someone doing some arts and crafts in the middle of the woods was a bit weird, but not connected to our case. Bending over, Nick found a black feather and also tucked it away inside his notebook. Without much more of interest, he went outside to investigate the clearing a bit more. He brushed aside leaves trying to find any traces of some spell work, or well, anything left behind. Finally, he gave up letting us head back for the night. I cannot sense any traces of magic left behind. If the spell was made a few days ago like the reports suggest, then those traces would be long faded. We may need to wait until something happens to understand what is the cause of these events, Nick explained as we headed back. It was a bit cool and I wished I knew we were going to be camping out for a few days. I would need to buy some clothing tomorrow. I only had my debit card on me. How would that work? Did the charges show up in past statements when we got back to summer? Or would my card not even work? Hey, about this time travel thing, I started my mind abuzz with questions. Don't worry about it, Nick dismissed. It would take a very long time to fully explain it, but it's fine. Anything you do here won't change your future in the slightest. The corporation knows what they're doing. I needed to wrap my head around the fact aliens might be real and time travel definitely was real. We may have only gone back a few months, but it was almost too much for my brain to take. I never asked if we went back or forward in time to the right autumn. My phone stopped working, so I couldn't check to see the date or if anyone contacted me for a job. I really needed a second person to handle things while I was gone. When we got back, Rebecca was outside by a camera on a tripod. Nick kept going to the house, but I stayed behind to talk with her. She gave me a displeased look but didn't usher me away. More work? I asked. No, it's a hobby. I like to take photos of the night sky. She admitted getting ready for someone to tease her for her pastime. For the first time that night, I looked up. Being a city person, I never really looked at the stars before. The sight was completely amazing. Without any light pollution, I could clearly see colors in the night sky I've never seen before. Deep blues and purples stood out against the black with countless stars glittering away. A small blinking red light was slowly making its way across the sky. I pointed it out to Rebecca, who said it was a satellite as if it was nothing. I thought it was insane you could see something in orbit. I was more awestruck when she pointed to a red star, saying it was Mars. It was so far away, and yet I could see it without the use of a telescope, after seeing how beautiful the night sky really was. I fully understood why Rebecca and Chaz were so obsessed with it. I hope that this case really turns out to be aliens. That would be pretty cool. Don't you think? I said to her as she was fiddling with her camera. The people from your side of the corporation normally doesn't say stuff like that. They just treat us like a bunch of nut jobs, she replied, after all the bad experiences from past agents. I understood how she would be so distrustful of us. I bet it wasn't just agents, but normal people dismissing her beliefs as well. Some of the ideas might be a little bit out there. But I wanted to side with her over the idea of something really being out in the night sky. Vicky might seem a bit cold, but he's willing to believe in aliens being behind this if he could find the proof. That seemed to make her ease up a little. The two people barging in on her case weren't going to dismiss her outright and wane to work with her. I wonder what those two are doing inside. Chaz isn't really talkative to new people, and your partner seems about the same, she said while looking towards the house. I bet they're just sitting in silence like a bunch of weirdos. My stomach grumbled because I hadn't eaten since lunch. I left her to take some more photos before she turned in for the night. I was right about Chaz and Nick. They were sitting by the monitors, not speaking and just going over notes. I was displeased by the selection of food Nick brought along, so Chaz was kind enough to share an instant noodle bowl I made with an electric kettle. This house looked abandoned, but it still had water and electricity. After eating, I was going to crawl into the sleeping bag until Chaz warned me to watch out for spiders while I slept. I turned right back around to help watch the monitors until I passed out sitting in the fold-out chair. Nick must have put me in my sleeping bag. When I woke up, sunlight was pouring through the windows and my body felt stiff. Rebecca's voice was what pulled me from my dreams. She was making a fuss over something. Getting up, I walked into the scene of her demanding them to go over the recordings, looking for any signs of some UFOs visitors last night. Her frantic state made me extremely nervous. I'm telling you, I wasn't dreaming. Someone was in my room late night and I woke up with this. She raised her hair so we all could see a red welt behind her ear. Chaz looked nervous at her outburst. Nick went over to get a closer look at the small spot for her. It feels like there is something under the skin. Or something. There had to be. Her voice was cut off when Nick straightened back up to say what the mark really was. It's a spider bite. The swelling should go down in a while. As far as I'm aware, there are no poisonous spiders here. You should be fine. I was in your room for a few minutes. I forgot my phone charger and I didn't think you were awake to see me, Chaz admitted. Having a reasonable explanation did not help her at all. She freaked out in the same way anyone would hearing a spider was all over them while they slept. She darted out of the room and up the stairs. In a few seconds we heard the shower start. The moment she was out, it would be my turn. I wished I had a change of clothing. I suddenly felt very itchy. After we were both finished in the shower, a phone call came in. A farmer had a dead cow and had no idea how it happened. With all the strange events going on, he wanted the people investigating it all to take a look before he handed the body over to the locals for the cause of death. Chaz found out about my lack of clean clothing and offered some of his. The t-shirt was a bit large and the pants baggy. A belt and rolling up the pant legs solved the problem. It was much better than the clothing I slept in might have spider traces on. I really needed to get that phobia under control. We left in their car, Nick in the front seat going over notes as Chaz drove. Rebecca and I in the back seat trying and failing to figure out the case. The farmer greeted us when we parked and led us to the deceased cow he found that morning. Rebecca appeared sick at the sight of it. Nick got to work putting on a pair of gloves so he could go over the animal looking for wounds of any kind. There have been 23 dead cows in the past 3 weeks, the farmer started to explain. We brought them to the local vet and all blood samples came back negative. The strangest thing is, each was missing an organ without any cut marks. Everyone is baffled by it. Chaz nodded along and showed me some notes he made. He was able to get the information of what organs were missing in each cow. Some overlapped, but none appeared to be favored over the others. It was impossible for them to be taken out without any surgery cuts left behind. This really was looking as if aliens were the cause, and I felt a heavy feeling of fear start in my stomach. After Nick was finished, he told the farmer someone from our company would collect the body shortly for more testing. This was the 3rd cow the farmer had lost. Overall, he didn't care of what the cause was as long as it stopped. He couldn't afford to lose more cattle. Nick took him aside so he could arrange payment for the cow's body. I knew he was going to give the man money out of his own pocket and frame it like the corporation paying for the lost cows. As we waited for them to be done, the 3 of us leaned against the car. This is totally aliens, I said finally, and the other 2 agreed.